آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So I went to Umrah many years ago, and it was really crowded. It was actually in Ramadan. It was very crowded, and you could barely move. You know, during the sa'i, you could barely move. Not just that, but it was actually a little bit annoying. People were, pushing and shoving, and there was even this one guy who, I don't know why, when we were going between Safa and Marwa, he, for some reason, had to be right behind me, and he had his fist right in my back. And I'm in the Umrah, you can't say anything because, you're not allowed to, so you have to just hold it. And people are coughing in your face. It was just a terrible experience the first day. And I don't know, I was talking to somebody that night, and he made me change my mind. And he said, it's basically in your head. Positivity is in your head, how you look at things. So I decided to just flip things around and look at things in a positive light. So when I went the next day and it was very crowded, I thought to myself, MashaAllah, all these people are coming to worship Allah. This is a great thing. It should be more crowded than this. When the guy coughs in my face, I said, MashaAllah, this is the spit of a Muslim in my head. This is great, MashaAllah. Just putting a positive light, and then I actually enjoyed it much more, just by changing my mentality. So, I want to give you a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, and or hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And one of the Sahaba said, مَا رَأَيْتُ أَحْدًا أَكْثَرَ تَبَسُمًا مِنَ النَّبِيِّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. I never saw anybody who smiled more than the Prophet ﷺ. Think about this. Imagine you take a time machine, you go back to the time of the Prophet ﷺ, you tell him, hey, I'm from the future, I'm from Piscataway, New Jersey. Imagine what face you would see on him by default. He would be smiling. Because out of all the people in Medina, the thousands of people who lived there, and in Mecca, this Sahabi never saw anybody who smiled more often than the Prophet ﷺ. This is a great thing. So I actually wanted to give the topic on the forgotten sunnahs. The sunnahs that are not talked about much, but are actually very important. But he said I thought it would be boring, so I'm just going to give you one of those sunnahs. And one of the sunnahs is smiling. So smiling is a sunnah, and I'm not talking about a sunnah just in the aspect of the Prophet ﷺ used to do it type of sunnah. Like he used to ride a camel, that's a sunnah, but it's not a sunnah in terms of you getting extra deeds. No, it's actually a sunnah in terms of when you smile in somebody's face, you actually get good deeds. How do we know this? Because there's a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ who said, وَتَبَسُّمْ فِي وَجْهِ أَخِيكِ صَدَقَةً. A smile in your brother's face is a sadaqah, it's a charity. You actually get good deeds by smiling at your brother. So smiling is something I feel should be talked about on the minbar more than almost any other topic. I mean, think about it. If the Prophet ﷺ did something so much that some of the Sahaba say, I never saw anybody do more than anybody else, shouldn't that be something that we talk about a lot? But I don't know why we don't talk about it. I mean, imagine the most religious person you know, the most religious sheikh you know. What's his face usually like? I mean, I'm sure, inshallah, alhamdulillah, a lot of them smile, but I remember I had a conversation with one person. I used to give khutbahs in Fords. I remember one of the first times I gave a khutbah, one of the leaders came and said, brother, people are complaining you're smiling too much. So, okay. Next time I came up and I tried to be very serious, and actually the khutbah was terrible. I just couldn't do it. And I thought about it, and that's the Prophet, although he used to be serious on the minbar when he's giving a khutbah, but smiling is actually a sunnah, right? So, I want to talk about it in different aspects, and positivity in different aspects. Hopefully I want to make it interactive, inshallah, so that you can give me some examples. So I want to talk about smiling, not just about the hadith and the sunnah, but how it affects us in our lives, how it can affect our health, how it can affect different parts of our lives, and also positivity with that. So I want to give you an example or a fact. How many times a day do you think an adult smiles? average adult smiles how many times a day?
50.
50. Anybody else? 51? 20 times. Anybody else? Huh? 100 times. So the average adult smiles 15 times or less a day.
Wow.
Some people less than 5 times a day. The average child smiles, guess how many?
100.
100?
200.
200?
300.
500 times a day.
No way.
500 times a day, the average child.
What's the number?
But when you become an adult and you have taxes to worry about, and property, and whatever, and job, you start smiling 15 times a day. Which tells us what? What does it tell us? It tells us that smiling is part of our fitrah. Right? When we were young, we used to smile a lot, and then stuff happened in our lives, and we got married, and have kids, and have jobs, and all this stuff. And all these things come at us, and it makes us, grumpy and tired and whatever, including myself, right? So smiling and being happy is part of our fitrah. You think about it, like our kids, So actually, I was reading one thing, if you want to be a good dad, you should smile by default. As a dad myself, I'm like yelling at my kid 100 times. He does it like the other day. Yesterday actually. We got him this raking set. It's like a toy raking set. They're supposed to use outdoors, but he has to use it indoors, and he's using it to reach everything. And I'm yelling at him 100 times a day. Stop it! Stop it! So I'm always yelling at him, and I have to remind myself that I need to smile at him all the time and be positive and show him a positive, loving face all the time. Not just that, but like let's say your spouse cooked something that you didn't like, right? The biryani wasn't, didn't have enough fried onions, or wasn't spicy enough. What do you do when you see that? What do you do when that happens? Tamir, your wife cooks something you don't like, what do you do?
You just eat it, man.
Yeah.
The Prophet said if you don't like food, you just don't say anything.
That's good. Very good, mashallah. He's very well trained. So if you don't like it, you just don't say anything, right?
He doesn't smile anymore.
Huh? He doesn't
He does not
smile.
smile.
So how many people here, many uncles, when their wife doesn't cook something, immediately, why is this like that? Why didn't you put this? It's too dry. It's too whatever, right? And versus, like my wife, she tells me she knows when I don't like the food. I don't say anything. She's like, it's great, mashallah, it's amazing. Yeah. It's actually one of the times you're allowed to lie is actually to your spouse. It's for a hadith, it's one of the times you're allowed to lie. So like let's say she cooked something you didn't like. Say, oh mashallah, it's great, it's amazing. And you didn't like it. That's allowed. But she says she knows when I don't like something because I don't take seconds. Right? They figure it out, right? So part of smiling and positivity and being nice is that, right, to our spouse. That maybe something we don't like, but we can, be nice about it. We can be happy and positive. Can we give any examples? Abdullah? Not yet.
Not yet.
Inshallah soon. Anybody give me examples of, for instance, like let's say you did something that your wife didn't like and she kind of covered it up and was nice about it? Nobody did anything? Any examples? Awesome.
No, I'm looking at you.
Okay. So part of this positivity is that. So that's number one. Smiling is good for that. Not only that, but smiling, it's been shown in studies, it actually increases your lifespan. No joke, it actually increases your lifespan. So they did a study of baseball players. So there's actually a TED Talk about this, the power of smiling. So he said that they took baseball cards from like the 1940s or 50s, so back then, and they looked at the baseball card and they saw what kind of smile that they have. They categorized into 3 types of smiles. The no smile, so like this, the medium smile, which is, right, and then the beaming smile, like showing your teeth and everything. And then they looked at, because they had these baseball players and they knew what year they were born, and they looked at when they died. And they saw that on average, the difference between the person who didn't smile at all and the person who had the beaming smile was 7 to 8 years longer. Out of all these thousands of baseball, they lived 7 to 8 years longer, and the medium smile lived like 3 or 4 years longer. So it actually shows that, these people who smile, they actually even looked at yearbook photos. In your yearbook photo, if you see people who smile the same kind of smile, they found that they live longer. What else? There was a study done, if you read the book, there's a book called by, what's that guy's name with the weird hair? He has a book called Outliers. It's a book called Outliers, very, very famous book called Outliers. Where you come up with like 10,000 hours, if you heard, like you become an expert. So actually the first chapter of the book, he talks about a community in Pennsylvania. And these are a community of Italian Americans. And they showed that they lived very long lives, not just long lives, but very healthy lives, positive, like very good lives. So they were wondering, what's the magic thing? Okay, they're Italian, maybe it's a Mediterranean diet. And they found that the food they ate was terrible. It was high in fat, high in sugar, they were all overweight. So it had nothing to do with diet. They said, okay, maybe it has something to do with the community they live in, the air they breathe. They found, no, it's just like everywhere else. They tried doing every study, maybe it's something genetic. And they found that no, other people who are from the same town, that they all came from like the same town. All people from the same town, they, who lived in different areas, they died much earlier. They couldn't figure out any reason why this was happening. And they found out eventually that the reason was because they lived happy lives. They had a good community. It was as simple as that. They had stress-free lives. They worked hard, but what they found was they all came, everybody in that town came from the same village in Italy. They all came over. So one guy came, he brought his cousin, he brought his uncle, grandmother, everybody came. Practically the whole village had moved to this small town, right? And because of that, everybody knew each other. So next door was your sister and your brother and your grandma and your this and your whole family and your friend. Everybody knew everybody. Maybe even your parents lived with you. So what they found was that there was a sense of community. So they go to work, they're stressed out, they come home, and then they start to diffuse. They are with their kids and their grandkids, and all the grandparents have their grandkids in the house or next door, or they have their friends and they have their part. So they started having, because they had stress-free lives, or not stress-free, they had ways of reducing their stress, they actually lived very long and happy lives, even though they were overweight and they ate the worst food with high in fat, and high in sugar, and high whatever. But the stress itself was causing disease. And I was talking to, a friend of mine, and he was having like health problems. He's like, I don't know, I'm eating right, I'm doing all this stuff. And I was asking him, do you have a lot of stress in your life right now? He said, yeah. I said, maybe that's what's causing the issue. Because think about it, when we're stressed out, when we're, just all we can think about is that our body starts to, that flight, I'm not a doctor, but the fight or flight response, the hormones that when something happens, your hormones, cortisol and all this stuff starts to happen. Our bodies were not meant to have that in long term. Our bodies are meant to have these hormones for a short term. Like for instance, let's say you're in the jungle or something, back in you're a caveman, and you saw a tiger, right? And your hormones your adrenaline kicks in, your hormones kick in, so you could run or you could fight, right, the tiger. But imagine this was happening every single day, or every single hour, which is what stress does to us, right? When we're stressed about work or family or whatever, or all these things, it's as if we're like fighting a tiger every single day, and our hormones are constantly kicking in. And it's actually starting to affect our health, and it's starting to kill us. So, we need to, part of this thing is to live more positive aspects of lives, more positive lives. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ was. Like imagine you were in, you were a Sahabi. Imagine you're a Sahabi at the time of the Battle of the Trench, right? Just imagine this, there's thousands and thousands of enemies coming and you're basically outnumbered. And you're digging, imagine you're looking from the top and you see a bunch of people digging, right? And there's thousands of, an army coming in. That's very stressful. And you're thinking like there's no hope. And what does the Prophet ﷺ do? Like they get to a rock and he hits it. He says, oh, we're going to open up Persia and we're going to open up Rome. And they think like, what? But the Prophet ﷺ gave them hope. Like, okay, you think it's tough now, you think it's stressful now, but I'm telling you in the future, things are going to get much, much better. You're gonna open up the whole world. So forget about this small bit of stress that you're in right now. Think about what's going to happen in the future. And this amazing thing that's going to happen to you guys. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and there's a 4th century Christian theologian